Hello everyone, my name is Antonio and this is my React presentation. The first thing we're going to do is answer the question, what is React? React is a free and open source front-end JavaScript library for building user interfaces based on UI components, UI being user interface. It is maintained by Meta, formerly known as Facebook, and a community of individual developers and companies. What do we need to know to use React? We need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It is a good idea to know more JavaScript than a beginner amount, and that is because it is heavily reliant on JavaScript. React uses an HTML and JavaScript syntax called JSX, which we'll talk a little bit more later, and it's a combination of JavaScript and XML. Now we're going to go look at some examples from the react.js.org site. Now these are just a rough idea of what we can expect to see when we use React in our applications. Now this here kind of shows us an example of using the JavaScript XML syntax. If we unclick that, we can see that this would be what we would normally see. And it's obviously a lot shorter to use this JSX syntax. Now, just to show the workings of it, we can see that it updates as I type. I could type random items and they will update automatically. Right here, it shows us how a clock works. Basically, the way this works is you create a class, you name the class, and then you make that a React component. Here we have a constructor with a prop, which I'll explain later what a prop is. But basically, these are items that React creates through various files that we make per item. As we go down here, we can see that they use the render, just as the previous example before. Render is used to output items to the HTML document. Here it displays hello Taylor, and down here it displays the time. Now there's a lot of components going into this, like the set state and just normal amount of programming that goes into getting the time and whatnot. And I won't get into those, mostly because they're a lot more information that I can cover here. And as I continue down, we can see that we can use React to also make a to-do list. Now, I will show a different example of a similar to-do list later. This is kind of a way that they show it here, and this is just a snippet. I will show that there is quite a lot more work into the background, going into the background here. Here we can see that it works just fine. We'll say item 1 or item 1 here, and we can see that it works just fine. Works just how it should be. Nothing's breaking, obviously. Now here is just a generic, almost like this output, but it uses some more of a more styling to make this look the way it does. Now React will use a lot of the same components that you would if you were just using JavaScript. It's obviously an addition to JavaScript, but you need a bit of a different approach to using React. Now, there is two ways that you can use React. The first way, which is actually not the way that I found a lot of examples for, is if you just include the React library into your JavaScript document. And the second way is to use Node.js. And that I found Node.js to be the simpler way of using React. Now, to get started, we first need to start by checking if we have Node.js on our system. We can do this by using the terminal using the command node-v. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my VS Code here. I'm just going to demonstrate. So you don't have to have anything, so don't worry about that. We can just go here, and how I said before, we'll just type node-v. Now, before this presentation, I went ahead and downloaded Node. Another thing that we can do is, if we don't have Node, if that just comes up with an error, we can go into this site here and we can download Node. It's a pretty simple process. You go to this site, nodejs.org, and you can just click here, and for the most part it'll detect your system, so you should be able to just use this one here. Now, the differences between these two, the LTS stands for long-term maintenance or service, which means that this is going to have a lot less bugs than this one, since this is a newer and more experimental version. I would highly recommend to go with the LTS version rather than the current version. And that's mostly because it will have a lot less bugs, like I said before. Now let's go back to this. When we create our React application by using the command line, we use the command npx create-react app. Now, I already have done that step, and you can see all the folders here, but I'm going to do it again just to show an example of how it would look. So let me go here and just make a new folder, and we'll just name it test. We'll select this folder, and in this folder we'll go ahead and get the command line here, the terminal, and we'll do npx what was that? Create react app, and now we can simply do a dot to make sure that this is creating the application in this folder. So we want that to stay in here, and we'll go ahead and hit enter, and we'll just let that go ahead and run. And while that's running, we'll just kind of go over a few other things, since the process can take a little bit. Now, when the application loads in and starts and creates our files, there are two commands that we need to know. The first one is npm start, which is focused on the environment. We use this to see what our application looks like at the current moment. So this would be as if we use live server. So this would be used to see what the application is right now. And then there's also npm run build, which would actually produce our application. Now, I don't know a whole lot about this one, but we'll see this one in action today. And again, we'll also see JSX, and let's go real quick to this, see if it worked. Okay, so here we see created our folders, and I want to just quickly go through these. So this is our main folder for our site. This folder, or this index HTML file, is what would normally be our main index HTML file. This is in the public folder, and we are not going to touch that, and we're just going to leave it as it is. We could change things here, and the most important part of this file is this part right here, because we are setting this as our root root ID to be used by React. All of the items that React creates are going to go straight into this ID div item. And let's just go real quick here. In this source folder, we have the main index.javascript folder or file. Now this file creates a constant root item, which goes and makes a React DOM or a virtual DOM, and it creates it from that root ID div, how I said before. Now here you can see that it uses that same render component that we saw in the example from the react.js website. And this here will be our most important piece right here, because this is the way we start. The way that React works is a tree-like system. So this file, or let's go back, this index.html file will call this root, and vice versa. They'll call each other. So the index.js will go into the index.html. This will call this app file, which is right here, this app.json or .js file, which will then call any files that we need for our application. Now this is just a sample one, and I'm gonna switch back to the example that I had before just to prepare to show some other things. Now let's go to here. So here, this is an example of a to-do list, how we saw before. And just to go over what this JSX syntax is, it's a syntax extension to JavaScript. It is not necessary, but it is helpful as a visual aid when working with UI inside the JavaScript code. We also have an extension that we can use within VS Code, which I will show where to find in a little bit. It is called ES7 React Redux GraphQL React-native snippets, and it is similar to using the exclamation mark when we are in an HTML file. This allows us to use RFC in order to create a function component inside of a react.js file, giving it the name of the file. What I mean by this, if I can switch back here, if I were to create a new, well, let me show you the extension first. The extension here is right here. So this extension will allow you to do exactly what I just read. It will allow you to do a few other things, but we won't get into those right now. So we go into these files, and let's say I needed a new, oh my bad, a new file, and I just said it's a test.js. I can go RFC, hit enter, and that creates a function with the name of the file, test, how I named it before, as the name of the function. Now we won't need that for this example, so I'll get rid of it. Let's delete that. Okay, so now let's go back to our presentation here. Okay, so this is the link to this to-do list that I am going to show right now, and let me just display it for you all real quick here. Now, as I said before, we would run this in the terminal, and we would just say npm start. Now this is kind of going through these files, making sure everything is fine, and we're going to go ahead and look at these items here. Now here is the list Here are all the items within the list. So we can actually select these items and we can clear those completed items. And this is just a short little example of React and what it does. And just to kind of go over those functions again, the way these functions work, they take the name of the folder for the most part, and they can also have functions within them, the same way as a JavaScript file. Now, for simplicity's sake, it's good to separate the functions into different files, different JS files. So it's kind of like that tree-like structure, a branch going down to a different branch, going down to a different branch. So this would be one item, this would be a different item that pulls from it, all the way up to the app, all the way up to the index. So, and another thing that I wanted to mention really quick here, if you noticed on this index JavaScript file, or actually this one here, this isn't necessarily HTML syntax. This to-do list with the closing. This is that JSX that I was talking about, and it helps simplify know what your various items are. Now that was React, and I hope you guys all enjoyed it and it was helpful. Thank you.